What is up, guys? Soon the Savage back, and here it is. Week 17 predictions. I have been through week after week after week. Doing this for 16 weeks. What's one more? This is the final predictions video I will be making in this decade because 2020 I'm going to be coming out with my NFL postseason predictions, so I have two more predictions I'm going to be making after this. NFL postseason and Super Bowl prop bet predictions because, I did those last year and yeah. But basically, before I start, you might remember a year ago, I did release my first ever NFL predictions video. It wasn't my first predictions video on my channel because my first one was MLB 2018 postseason predictions. This was my second. This was NFL Week 17 predictions. So it's amazing to see how far I've come because this time, it's about a year later. Been doing this a lot longer. But anyways, thank you all for sticking around. But of course, without further ado, let's get this video started. Okay, so before we get to our very first prediction, you may notice that when I predict most of these matches, most of them will be taking place at 4 o'clock or 4:25. Now, the reason for that is when they first make the NFL schedule, they usually do it either in July or August when the schedule gets released. Now, usually during the season, they'll flex certain matches due to how important they are. Now, currently, because Week 17, the time you play is really decided on where the match takes place, depending on what time zone you're in. So, if you're in the East or the Central time, if you're in Eastern or Central time zone, you're going to be playing at 1 o'clock. If you're in Mountain or Pacific time zone, then you're going to be playing at 4 o'clock. Now, there is no Atlantic time zone because Atlantic is in North America. You only see Atlantic time zone in Canada. And then there's Newfoundland time zones, but I'm not going to get into that. But anyways, and then, as the season goes on, once we get to basically Week 17, they will flex certain matches. But man, that rambling went on way longer than I wish it could have. But why don't we just get started with our very first match between the New York Jets and the Buffalo Bills. The Jets came off a 16-10 victory over the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Buffalo Bills came off a 24-17 loss against the New England Patriots. Starting off with the Jets, and you guys, as always, you ruined your tank. But to look at your season, what the hell was it? I just don't get your season. You guys had a lot of hype. You guys were supposed to come out of the basement and actually be a decent team. But everything happened. Sam Darnold with mononucleosis. Looking at your stats, you guys had one of the worst offenses in the league. Defense, depends. In terms of rushing yards, you guys had an amazing pass rush. Secondary was okay. But anyway, starting off, Sam Darnold, 183 yards, a touchdown, and no picks. He had himself an okay game. Le'Veon Bell had 72 rushing yards. Jamison Crowder was your top receiver, 4 receptions for 60 yards. Honestly, there's not much else I could say about you guys, except the fact that you were just able to edge out the Pittsburgh Steelers with their new quarterback carousel of Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges. That's not really impressive, and once again, you guys just keep ruining your tank. And then you have the Bills. Look, I'm kind of intrigued to see what you can do in the postseason because, look, you guys have an amazing defense. That's what I like. Looking at your defensive stats on yards per game, you rank 3rd, which is amazing. But in yards per game in the offense, you are ranked 24th. Now, you do have a very good rushing game, but Josh Allen is just way too inconsistent. He only completed 50% of his passes, had 208 yards and 2 touchdowns. Devin Singletary got very few touches. He only had 46 rushing yards. Cole Beasley was your top receiver, 7 receptions, 108 yards. And John Brown has proved to be maybe Josh Allen's number 1 target because even though he only had 1 reception, that was for 53 yards and a touchdown. I mean, your offense, you guys had maybe 2 good drives, and that's it. Other than that, the Patriots just made you into their bitch. So honestly, gotta pick a winner for this one. Bills are favored by 1.5, and they can't really do anything. They're the number 5 seed. Nothing can change about that. So I don't know. Do they try or do they not? Honestly, I think they're going to be resting a lot of starters, but somehow that's going to be just enough to beat the butt fumble. So Bills win this game and cover the spread. And now you have our very next match with my boys, the New Orleans Saints versus the Carolina Panthers. Now, you might be wondering, well, Saints, they're still fighting for their spot in the playoffs. Why aren't they a 4 o'clock match? Well, first off, only so many matches can happen at 4 o'clock. And second, Well, it's really just to determine seeding, and honestly, that doesn't really matter unless the match is do or die, like win the division or make the wild card. So honestly, that's why we're a 1 o'clock match. But anyways, enough about that. Saints won 38-28 over the Tennessee Titans, and the Carolina Panthers came off a 38-6 loss against the Indianapolis Colts. Starting out with the Saints, we didn't exactly have a very good first quarter. Just I had vibes of Eagles versus Saints in the 2018 divisional game, where we had a horrible first quarter, but the second half was when we really came out. Anyways, Drew Brees threw for 278 yards, 79 yards, 3 touchdowns and no picks. Alvin Kamara finally showing that he's back. 11 carries for 80 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. He did follow that up with 30 receiving yards, which was pretty good. Michael Thomas is your new leader in receiving yards, as last game he had 12 receptions for 136 yards and a touchdown. And Jared Cook, later in the season, he's proved how he's going to be a big key factor into our playoff run, as he had 3 receptions for 84 yards and 2 touchdowns. Honestly, though, our defense at the beginning had a hard time getting it done, but, eventually our defense tightened up, and we were able to stop the Titans. And I also got to mention Deontay Harris for his amazing returns, mainly on kick returns, as he had 4 kick returns for 150 yards. One hell of a performance by him. And then you have the Panthers. Nothing to say. I mean, you guys decided, okay, Kyle Allen, that's enough. You're gone. You're not playing. And you have Will Grier, who is even worse. 224 yards, no touchdowns, and 3 picks. Christian McCaffrey only had 54 rushing yards, but he had 119 receiving yards, which made up for it. And other than that, your offense was just completely flat. Christian McCaffrey had like half your receiving yards. He literally is your workhorse. As the next receiver was Greg Olsen with 33 receiving yards. Nowhere even close. Man, you guys need some depth. You need a good quarterback. Cam Newton, I don't know what you guys are going to do with him, but I do hear that he's probably going to be gone. Honestly, Panthers, I know he might be injury prone, but try to get Cam Newton back, because literally you're Christian McCaffrey. You need the right quarterback. Saints favored by 13 to win, and you know what? I don't care. We win this game. And now you have our very next matchup between the Cleveland Browns and the Cincinnati Bengals. Browns last week came off a 31-15 loss against the Baltimore Ravens, and the Cincinnati Bengals came off a 38-35 loss against the Miami Dolphins. Starting off, nothing I can really say about the Browns. I had you guys winning the division, and you just pull that off. Baker Mayfield had 192 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. Also, what good is Nick Chubb? He's only been your best offensive player this year, and he only had 45 rushing yards. And you guys are too dumb to even give him a chance to play a key role in the receiving game. Jarvis Landry, 7 receptions for 74 yards. He was okay. Odell Beckham Jr. had 4 receptions for 44 yards and a touchdown. He was your main guy, and other than that, nothing out of you guys. You held the Ravens until the 2-minute warning in the second quarter. Up until then, you guys were all right, and then you blew it. And then the Cincinnati Bengals, well, what? 23 points in the fourth quarter. I thought you guys were trying to tank, but here's what it was. Andy Dalton, 396 yards and 4 touchdowns, had one hell of a game. Joe Mixon, although only ran for 50 yards. But your big guy was Tyler Boyd, 9 receptions, 128 yards and 2 touchdowns. Somehow you guys were able to complete your comeback, but unfortunately for you, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, the Dolphins were able to kick a last-second field goal to win the game. Otherwise, the game would have just ended in a tie. So honestly, what the hell was that game? Because that was actually one of the better games of the year, but it's between two of the worst teams in the NFL. The offenses will flash because both your defenses are absolutely terrible. The Browns are favored to win this game, and you know what? I believe it. Browns win, and also screw you, New York Jets, for ruining 0-16. Because this would have definitely happened. 0-16 would have happened if you guys just freaking if you guys didn't lose to the Bengals. So goddamn you guys. But anyways, Browns win and cover the spread. And now you have our very next match between the Green Bay Packers and the Detroit Lions. Starting off, the Packers came off a 23-10 victory over the Minnesota Vikings, and the Detroit Lions came off a 27-17 loss against the Denver Broncos. Starting off with the Packers, well, Monday night definitely was not your best performance, if I'm going to be real with you. Aaron Rodgers, didn't even have that great a game. 216 yards, no touchdowns, and a pick. Aaron Jones, he did it all. 23 carries for 154 yards and 2 touchdowns. Devontae Adams had 13 receptions for 116 yards and no touchdowns, even though it should have been 14 receiving yards, 117 yards, and a touchdown. But of course, he dropped an easy pass in the end zone. So honestly, neither team really deserved to win this game. Both of you were terrible. But of course, you were lucky to face Kirk Cousins on a Monday night because he's absolutely terrible in that scenario. And then you have the Lions. Ever since Stafford went out, you guys have just been a complete dumpster fire. David Blau couldn't even complete 50% of his passes. Did have a touchdown and no picks. Kerryon Johnson did make his return, but he only had 42 rushing yards. And Kenny Golladay did also prove that he is possibly a force to be reckoned with if they have a good quarterback, as he had 6 receptions for 66 yards and a touchdown. So honestly, who wins this game? Green Bay is favored by 12.5, but you know what? For seeding and for my upset of the week, I'm going to say the Detroit Lions win this game, stun the Packers, and prove how overrated their team really is. Because the thing is, if the Packers lose and the Saints win, I get the bye. But if I want that first bye, I'm going to need the Saints to win, Packers to lose, and the 49ers to lose so I can get that number 1 seed. But anyways, doesn't matter. Lions pull off the ultimate upset. And now you're moving on to our very next match between the LA Chargers and the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chargers came off a 24-17 loss against the Oakland Raiders, and the Chiefs came off a 26-3 victory over the Chicago Bears. Starting off with the Chargers, you guys have maybe been the biggest disappointment of the season. I expected so much more out of you, and yet you disappoint. I mean, last year, you had maybe one of the best teams in the NFL, but unfortunately for you, you were a 5 seed. You won the wild card round, but then you got manhandled by the Patriots. And so this year, there were big expectations for you guys, and you pulled that off. 5-10. Phillip Rivers might be at the end of his rope, but he did have 279 yards, no touchdowns, no picks last game. Not terrible, but not amazing either. Melvin Gordon had 9 carries for 15 yards. He did have 2 touchdowns, and that was it. Austin Eckler had 11 rushing yards and only 58 receiving yards. Keenan Allen was your top wideout with 5 receptions for 71 yards. Other than that, no one else really performed as well. In terms of your defense, you guys had trouble stopping the Raiders. This team has been inconsistent as all hell, but the Raiders still have a chance for the playoffs. And then you got the Chiefs. Look, should I be happy that you only let the Bears score 3 points? No. Literally, if you want to show how legit your defense is, play the Bears. Like, seriously. You guys, your defense has maybe the biggest foolish optimism right now because you just beat up on the Bears, held them to 3 points, held them to less than 210 yards for the first time in maybe a few years. But anyways, Patrick Mahomes did his thing, 251 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. Damian Williams, your little running back carousel. Looks like Damian Williams will be the top running back as he had 65 rushing yards. Top receivers, you had Travis Kelce as he had 8 receptions for 74 yards and a touchdown. Tyreek Hill had 5 receptions for 72 yards, no touchdowns. So yeah, other than that, I'm interested to see what you guys are what's going to happen to you in January. I mean, your offense is going to be legit. Mahomes will do his thing, but will your defense be able to hold up to stiff competition? So for today, you're favored by 9 to win, and you know what? Screw it, you win. But don't cover the spread. The Chargers, Rivers will make this close, but of course, their kicker, I'm going to say the Chiefs will only win by 2 because in Chargers fashion, the special teams will choke the game away. And now you have our very next match between the Chicago Bears and the Minnesota Vikings. Bears came off a 26-3 loss against the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Vikings came off a 23-10 loss against the Green Bay Packers. So Bears. You guys were favorites to win the NFC North, but of course that happened. Trubisky proved that his season last year was just a fluke. Don't forget, he was a Pro Bowler, but he didn't initially get voted in. He was just, because Breeze opted out of the Pro Bowl, he was just the alternate. So Trubisky didn't do things. You went up against the Chiefs defense and you sucked. 157 yards. David Montgomery, I don't know what the future of the running game is, but maybe it's David Montgomery. He had 13 carries for 57 yards. Your receivers, your top guy was Allen Robinson, 6 receptions, 53 yards. But other than that, offense did not do jack squat. Like, come on, guys. It's the Chiefs. defense you're facing off against. They got one of the worst defensive units in the league. And then you have the Vikings. Look, Kirk Cousins, I said, this is the night he gets rid of the choker label. But, of course, he proved to me that he can never win the big game. He's 0-9 on Monday Night Football, has a horrible record against teams over 500. Not as bad as Matthew Stafford, but still pretty bad. And really just like under the spotlights, under a primetime game is where he completely falters. And in what ways? Well, he had 122 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. You guys were without Dalvin Cook, so that obviously took out a big part of your game, as your top runner was Mike Boone, who only had 28 rushing yards. Stephon Diggs was your top receiver, as he had 3 receptions for 57 yards and a touchdown. And Adam Thielen, even though he was back, did not have a single reception. So honestly, this game was a horrible game play by you guys. Your defense was able to keep up for a while, but then Aaron Jones just ran over all your hopes. And Aaron Rodgers was off all night, but of course, you couldn't stop Aaron Jones. So if I got to pick one of this one, I'm going to say the Bears come out with a victory, just because the Vikings, they can't do anything. They are guaranteed a 6 seed. Nothing better, nothing worse. They're in the playoffs, so obviously they're going to be resting their starters. So, Bears win. And, well, I know, and do they even have the spread? Give me a second. And yeah, Bears win and cover the spread, which is 3 at this point. And now you have our very next matchup between the Miami Dolphins and the New England Patriots. Dolphins came off a 38-35 victory over the Cincinnati Bengals, and the Patriots came off a 24-17 victory over the Buffalo Bills. Starting off with the Dolphins, well, Fitzpatrick showed his magic. Fitzmagic was there, as he threw for 419 yards, 4 touchdowns, and a pick. You guys, you gave up 23 points in the fourth quarter. So I guess you're maybe thinking that, okay, we need to tank. And, I don't know, I guess you really didn't want to go for the tie. Anyways, top rusher was Myles Gaskin. 16 carries for 55 yards on a touchdown. Top receiver, Devontae Parker, 5 receptions for 111 yards and a touchdown. Follow that up with Mike Gesicki for 6 receptions, 82 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So, honestly, your offense did show that it's capable of performing, but don't kid yourselves. It was against the Bengals. They don't exactly have the greatest defense. I mean, they don't have a good defense at all. And then the Patriots, the Bills kept it close, but unfortunately, you guys came out on top. Tom Brady had 271 yards, a touchdown, and no picks. Sony Michel had 21 carries for 96 yards. Rex Burkhead was the only guy to have the rushing touchdown. And honestly, the guy that really saved you guys was Julian Edelman with 5 receptions for 72 yards. He was mainly the turning point, got the most clutch receptions of the game. So honestly, it was a pretty good game played all together, keeping the Bills behind you, and that's about it. So even though, New England's favored by 16 to win, that is an insane amount. And you know what? They're going to win by 15. So Patriots win, but don't cover the spread. And now you have our final 1 o'clock matchup of today. So there have been 8 1 o'clock matchups. There's 8 1 o'clock, 7 4 o'clock, and 1 Sunday night primetime game. But this one is between the Atlanta Falcons and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Falcons came off a 24-12 victory over the Jacksonville Jaguars. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers came off a 23-20 loss against the Houston Texans. Starting off with the Falcons, I don't get what the hell you're trying to do. Are you trying to tank? Are you trying to show that you can actually have a promising future? I think you should just tank, and then you'll have a much better future. Oh, jeez. Starting off with Matt Ryan, had 384 yards, a touchdown, and 2 picks. His season hasn't exactly been great. I mean, at this point, Joe Burrow has thrown for more touchdowns in the Mercedes-Benz Superdome in 2 games. Stadium in 2 games than Matt Ryan has in the whole season in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So that was a meme I got off Instagram, so it was honestly an amazing meme. And in terms of rushing, Devontae Freeman had 13 carries for 53 yards and a touchdown, and also had 74 receiving yards and a touchdown. Your top receiver was Julio, 10 receptions for 166 yards, And Austin Hooper follows right behind with 82 receiving yards and no touchdowns. So, honestly, a decent offensive game, and that's about it. And then you got the Buccaneers. Jameis Winston, 335 yards, a touchdown, and 4 picks. So, he leads the league in passing yards, doesn't lead in touchdowns, leads in interceptions by a mile. So, I also found another very funny meme. It's like Jameis Winston, he's the kind of guy that would have a 3.9 GPA over thousands of hours of community service, yet have 5 DUIs on his record due to his horrible decision-making. The rushing game was pretty good. Ronald Jones had 77 rushing yards and a touchdown. Who even needs Mike Evans when you got Brashard Perriman with 7 receptions for 102 yards? And that was his top receiver. And other than that, well, Jameis did Jameis things. Just turn the ball over a lot. So currently, there is no favorite to win the game. So I'm just going to say the Falcons win because Jameis Winston will just get in the festive spirit of throwing more picks. Because at this point, the thing about these two teams is they hold some of the best offenses in the league, but they also hold some of the worst defenses. So, you know what? I'm going to say Falcons will do just slightly better. Falcons win this game. And now, of course, we're starting off with our very first flexed 4 o'clock matchup between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens. Steelers came off a 16-10 loss against the New York Jets, and the Ravens came off a 31-15 victory over the Cleveland Browns. So, starting off with the Steelers, well, the quarterback carousel is back. You know, Duck Hodges went to start the game, threw 2 picks, and then the Steelers, of course, they panicked and thought it's time to bring back in Mason Rudolph. And Mason Rudolph did actually a pretty decent job, 129 passing yards for a touchdown, but eventually he did get injured, so of course they were forced to have Duck Hodges come back. James Conner didn't really do jack squat. He only had 32 rushing yards. Deontay Johnson might be your new number 1 receiver with 8 receptions, 81 yards, and a touchdown. Juju was unable to do too much. Maybe, I think he needs a guy like Ben. But also he's been injured for most of the season, so it doesn't quite help his case. And so, honestly, how did you lose the Jets? Like, seriously, your Steelers, you're kind of pathetic. But you still are fighting for a playoff spot. So if you win this game and the Titans lose, you get the last spot. And then you have the Baltimore Ravens. You guys completely shocked me this season. I wasn't sure if Lamar Jackson was able to take the next step into being a passer. My God, he's an MVP. He's the MVP of the league. Lamar had 238 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no picks, but he also followed it up with 103 rushing yards. Very, very good performance. Receiving yards, Mark Andrews seems to be his favorite target. He had 6 receptions for 93 yards and 2 touchdowns. And other than that, no one really else could do too much because Lamar Jackson just took a Mack truck and ravaged Cleveland. So, because Baltimore does have the number 1 seed, they will be resting Jackson this week, and Robert Griffin III, or RG3, is going to get the start. And I know the Steelers are favored, but you know what? RG3, he's going to stun them, and he's going to win the game, as the Ravens will win the game and go 14-2. So Ravens win, and Steelers do actually have the spread. They're currently favored by 1.5, but of course, Ravens win. And now you have our very next matchup between the Washington Redskins and the Dallas Cowboys. Cowboys came off a 17-9 loss against the Philadelphia Eagles, and the Washington Redskins came off a 41-35 loss against the New York Giants. Starting off with the Redskins, you had 3 different guys play quarterback. Dwayne Haskins, Kelvin Harmon, and Case Keenum. Although Kelvin Harmon only was in to throw 1 pass for 11 yards, which, yeah, he completed. So, starting off, Dwayne Haskins, he got injured, but he had a pretty good game, throwing for 133 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no picks. And Case Keenum was brought back in, and he had 158 yards and a touchdown. So, then you got Adrian Peterson, who only ran for 36 yards. Honestly, you guys had a pretty good game. I mean, honestly, both teams did pretty well, but that's just because, really, both defenses were utter trash, but of course Daniel Jones is the better quarterback out of those guys. But anyways, not that great of a game played. I mean, your defense just got picked apart. I mean, you do have hope for the future, especially with a guy like Terry McLaurin, as he had 7 receptions for 86 yards. And then you have the Cowboys. Well, that 3-0 start seems really distant right now, as, your defense did a decent job. You held the Eagles to 17 points, but you guys, though, just played like absolute crap. Dak Prescott threw for 265 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. Zeke only ran for 47 yards, but he did have 7 receptions for 37 yards. Michael Gallup had 5 receptions for 98 yards, but of course, I think the most boneheaded move was benching Amari Cooper. Like, come on, I know he was having a down game, but you don't bench possibly one of your best players on the team. So honestly, Cowboys, they're going to win. They're going to win this game. They're favored. They're favored by 11 to win. I believe that. They will win, but they're not going to win the division because Eagles are going to win their game and win the division. So honestly, I can't wait for the Monday. I can't wait because Jason Garrett, as soon as Monday hits, he is going to be axed. He is going to be finito, gone, adios. Every goodbye you can have because Jason Garrett's going to be gone. But the Cowboys win this game and cover the spread, which is 11. And that's insanely high. And now you have our very next match between the Tennessee Titans and the Houston Texans. Titans last week came off a 38-28 loss to my boys in the New Orleans Saints. And the Houston Texans came off a 23-20 victory over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Starting off with the Titans, well, good game played overall, but of course the Saints were able to hold you off just long enough as they caused one huge turnover at the end. So starting off with the Titans. Ryan Tannehill, 272 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no picks. Honestly, a very good game that you guys played. Like, I'm not going to knock you for losing the Saints. I mean, they are one of the best teams in the NFL. They are the best, in my opinion. Anyways, but Dion Lewis had 68 rushing yards. A.J. Brown was your top rusher, even though he only had 1 rushing attempt for that. He got 49 yards and a touchdown. Your top receivers were Tajay Sharp, 5 receptions, 69 yards, has 69, with 2 touchdowns, and Jonnu Smith with 63 receiving yards and a touchdown. So, valiant effort, but you guys required perfection, and you were far from it, so that's why the Saints ended up winning. And then the Texans, with maybe their most unconvincing win of the year. I mean, I give them so much crap about their defense, but this game was literally a turnover fest. There were 6 turnovers in the first half of play. 6 turnovers, and somehow the game was tied, and somehow the Texans were able to just hold off the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Watson was horrible, 184 yards, no touchdowns, and a pick. Watson ran for 37 yards, and Carlos Hyde had 27 rushing yards and a touchdown. Kenny Stills had 57 receiving yards, and DeAndre Hopkins was incredibly limited to 23 receiving yards. Honestly, neither team deserved to win this game. Like, the Buccaneers couldn't stop turning over the ball. Same with the Texans. Both teams were absolute crap, but of course, the Texans' defense showed up as the pick 6 they got on the very second play of the game turned out to be the X factor. So Tennessee's favored to win, and I'm going to believe that Tennessee wins, and at this point they're going to win the division. No, not the division. Claim the 6th wildcard spot. And now you have our very next match between the Indianapolis Colts and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Colts last week came off a 38-6 victory over the Carolina Panthers, and the Jacksonville Jaguars came off a 24-12 loss against the Atlanta Falcons. Starting off with the Colts, it was an okay. You played a pretty good game. Come on, guys. Like, you faced Will Grier. Jacoby Brissett barely had to lift a finger as he only had 119 yards. Your rushing game, 3 different guys got touchdowns. Marlon Mack had 95 rushing yards and a touchdown. Jordan Wilkins, 84 rushing yards and a touchdown. And Jacoby Brissett, 37 rushing yards and a touchdown. Top receiver was T.Y. Hilton, 3 receptions, 26 yards. But look, you guys kind of need that strong-arm QB. Brissett isn't quite the guy you guys want as your quarterback of the future. Like, he was only good because he was under the Belichick system. And honestly, he did show some flashes of talent and some flashes of a promising future. But unfortunately, it just wasn't enough. And then the Jaguars, let's see. There was talks today that Doug Marrone was on the verge of getting axed, but of course those were allegations. He ended up later claiming that they were false. But Gardner Minshew didn't even complete 50% of his passes, 181 yards and a touchdown. Leonard Fournette ran for 71 yards, and honestly, you guys were just a complete dumpster fire against one of the worst defensive units in the league. Your top receiver was Chris Conley, 2 receptions, 56 yards and a touchdown. Honestly, I can't say too much because you guys were absolutely freaking pathetic. Nothing to say about your performance. So, if I got to pick a winner this one, Colts are favored, and you know what? Yeah. Favored by 6, and they will win this game and cover the spread. And now you have our final flexed 1 o'clock matchup. There still are 2 more 4 o'clock matchups to go, but out of all the ones that got flexed, out of the 5 1 o'clock matchups that got flexed, this is the last 1 o'clock matchup that got flexed. There is the Sunday night one that got flexed, but I'm going to get to that later. So, it is between the Philadelphia Eagles and the New York Giants. Giants came off a 41-35 victory over the Washington Redskins in overtime, and the Philadelphia Eagles came off a 17-9 victory over the Dallas Cowboys. So, Carson Wentz, well, what can I say about him? Like, honestly, I give him a lot of crap, like what he's done this season, but honestly, how he performs with absolutely no wide receivers is kind of astonishing. He doesn't have Alshon Jeffrey, Deshaun Jackson. He does not have Nelson Aguilar. He's literally got his receivers or his tight ends. But he had 319 yards, a touchdown, and no picks. Miles Sanders looks to be the new running back of the future as he had 79 rushing yards and a touchdown, and 75 receiving yards and a touchdown. Dallas Goedert was your top receiver because Ertz, he did miss a little bit of time for an apparent injury. But Goedert had 9 receptions for 91 yards and a touchdown. So they are the most dangerous tight end duo in the NFL. And honestly, tight end duos aren't exactly the best. But you know what? They both are incredibly dangerous. And then you have the Giants. And there is talks that Eli Manning is to likely retire at the end of the season. So Daniel Jones, 352 yards, 5 touchdowns, and no picks. I would say I'm impressed, but it's the Redskins. But what I am more impressed about was Saquon Barkley. 22 carries, 189 yards, and a touchdown. He also had 90 receiving yards and a touchdown. Golden Tate had a nice day, 96 receiving yards. Sterling Shepard, 6 receptions for 76 yards and a touchdown. Honestly, this game was just an offensive gun show, but the Giants were the ones that ended up winning the game. So, gotta pick a winner of this one. Eagles are favored. They're gonna win, and they will win the NFC East and will host the loser of the Sunday Night Football matchup. And now you have the very first of 2 of the original 4 o'clock matchups that were originally planned for at the beginning of the year. But it is between the Oakland Raiders and the Denver Broncos. Raiders came off a 24-17 victory over the LA Chargers, and the Broncos came off a 27-17 victory over the Detroit Lions. So the Raiders, you guys still have a shot for the playoffs. If you win this game, you'll go 8-8. Here's what you need. You need the Titans to lose, the Jaguars to win, and the Steelers to lose, and you also need to win. If all those happen, you make the playoffs at 8-8. It's not that convincing, but it happens. So anyways, Derek Carr, 291 yards, a touchdown, and no picks. Once again, Josh Jacobs was not present for this game, but was replaced by DeAndre Washington, who had 85 rushing yards and a touchdown. Hunter Renfrow flashed his talents as he had 7 receptions for 107 yards and a touchdown. Tyrell Williams had 82 receiving yards. And other than that, that's it. No one else was a really formidable weapon, but you guys were just able to edge the Chargers. And then you have the Broncos. Drew Lock also showed that he might have some potential for the future. At 192 yards, a touchdown, and no picks. Phillip Lindsay was really the main guy. 19 carries for 109 yards and a touchdown. Your top receiver that day was Deshaun Hamilton. 6 receptions, 65 yards and a touchdown. Your defense is going to be interesting, but there is possible talks that Von Miller might not be returning to the Broncos. And there is also talks about Chris Harris Jr. and Darius Slay doing a bit of a switcheroo in terms of what team they're going to be on. So, anyways, you got to pick a winner for this one. Broncos are favored, but I'm going to say the Raiders will pull off the upset. Broncos are favored by 3.5, and Raiders pull off the upset. And now you have our final 4 o'clock matchup of this decade, of the season, of the regular season at least, between the Arizona Cardinals and the LA Rams. Cardinals came off a 27-13 victory over the Seattle Seahawks, and the Rams came off a 34-31 loss against the San Francisco 49ers. Starting off with the Cardinals, Kenyon Drake might be the future because you basically don't want David Johnson anymore. But starting off with Kyler Murray, he had 118 yards, a touchdown, no picks. He did get injured, so Brett Hundley, 4 receptions for 9 yards. Kenyon Drake had 24 carries for 166 yards and 2 touchdowns. That was pretty much it. Larry Fitzgerald was your top receiver, 4 receptions for 48 yards and a touchdown. I don't know if he's going to return next year, but honestly, to me, all signs point to no. Either ship him off to a contender or give him a very good final game in the NFL. And then you have the LA Rams. Well, I'll get to you guys on what your future holds in for later. But anyways, Jared Goff, 323 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. He had a pretty decent game, but overall he's a pretty mediocre quarterback. And obviously the Super Bowl hangover or your Super Bowl appearance obviously got in your heads as you went from near Super Bowl champions to missing the playoffs this season. Todd Gurley had 15 carries for 48 yards and 2 touchdowns. Your 2 big receivers, Robert Woods, 117 yards, and Tyler Higbee, 104 yards, showing that they are the future. And same with Brandon Cooks and Cooper Kupp. I mean, Kupp and Cooks didn't have anywhere near as good of a performance, but anyways, good enough. But honestly, your defense just completely faltered at the worst time possible. So Jalen Ramsey, one of the best corners in the game, and he got absolutely freaking burned on a 3rd and 16. So honestly, the money, you guys don't exactly have a bright future going ahead of you. Because here's what happens. Jared Goff, super mediocre, is getting paid like a superstar. Todd Gurley, dealing with arthritis, paid like a superstar. And Jalen Ramsey, you guys sacrificed so much so you can make a big boom and possibly make a turn for the postseason. But of course, you even failed at that. Don't forget, you gave up 2 first-rounders just to acquire Jalen Ramsey. You guys, the money in the future and your future are potentially screwed. So even though I went on a long rambling on why the Rams are screwed for the future, Rams will still win this game. And here it is, folks, the final prediction of 2019 of this whole prediction series, or at least this season of predictions. It is Sunday Night Football between the San Francisco 49ers and the Seattle Seahawks. So starting off with the San Francisco 49ers, they came off a 34-31 victory over the LA Rams, and the Seahawks came off a 27-13 loss against the Arizona Cardinals. Starting off with the 49ers, Jimmy Garoppolo had a decent game. He threw for 248 yards, a touchdown, and 2 picks. The 2 picks do show a little bit of concern, but he was absolutely clutch, combining for 2 straight times where he would complete yards, would make completions for at least 16 yards. Like 2nd and 16, he would complete that on the final drive, and a 3rd and 16, he would complete that on the final drive. Absolutely freaking money. Raheem Mostert had 53 rushing yards and a touchdown. George Kittle had 79 receiving yards and a touchdown. Emmanuel Sanders, he didn't really show up until the final play where he made the big reception that would put the 49ers in field goal range to win the game. So overall, very good game played. Your defense does show a little bit of concern because, the Rams, they are a pretty good offensive team. So, honestly, well played by you guys. And then you have the Seahawks. I don't know what's happening. You have no rushing game. Chris Carson is gone, and you guys decided to bring Beast Mode back from retirement, as he is now going to be your number 1 running back. I don't know how well he's going to do. Honestly, I think this is just going to be a major flop. Russell Wilson had 169 yards, has 69, and a touchdown. No picks, just not a good game played against the Cardinals. Your top receiver was Jacob Hollister, as he had 64 receiving yards. Other than that, you guys were absolutely crap. And that's why San Francisco has such a big cushion to win this game. They're favored to win by 3. I think if the Seattle Seahawks didn't didn't have such an agonizing loss, it would be a much closer game. But of course, it's not enough. So San Fran is favored to win this game, but you know what? Seahawks win. And so at this point, now what does that leave? So for the AFC, this is what it's going to be. Sorry. Ravens and Patriots will have the byes. They'll be the number 1 and number 2. Ravens will be number 1. Patriots will be number 2. Chiefs will be number 3. Texans will be number 4. Bills will be number 5. And Titans will be number 6. And then in the NFC, if all goes right in terms of my predictions, Saints will have the number 1 seed. Seahawks will have the number 2 seed. Packers will have the number 3 seed. Eagles will have the number 4 seed. 49ers will have the number 5 seed. And the Vikings will have the number 6 seed. That's if all goes right, and hopefully it does. And that is going to wrap up my final video of this decade. Thank you guys all so much for watching, and also thank you all for sticking around all these 17 weeks that I've been making these predictions. You are the people that motivate me to continue making these videos. Currently, it's 1:36 a.m. the day of the games. Like, sometimes I film these late, but I was away for quite a bit of the holiday season, and I also kind of wanted to leave this to a bit of a later time just because you don't know, because certain matches would get flexed, and I wouldn't know until now. But anyways, thank you guys all so much for being so supportive of this channel. Anyways, make sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel, comment down below what other videos you want to see. If you want to see the rest of my prediction videos, links will be in the description below. If you want to see my very first NFL predictions video, which is Week 17 predictions, that link will also be in the description below. Make sure you also check in for next week because I will be coming out with NFL postseason predictions. I know I've been dying to make this video. I've been waiting, but once again, just like it's going to be a later video. Well, at least the time I'm filming. But anyways, also make sure to follow me on Instagram and Snapchat at SuitableSavage. Thank you guys all so much for watching. Have a great day. Peace out. Who Dat Nation is out.